Guys, it's Miss Dennison. Welcome back to the LCM Theater YouTube page. This week we will be talking about pantomime, its origins, and how it is used in modern theater today. So you should have your Microsoft Teams app open, and under Classroom Notebook, you have a page dedicated to today's YouTube video. These are some terms that we will be using throughout the video, so we're going to go ahead and give you the definition so you have them and you understand what we are talking about. The first is nonverbal communication. This is communication without the use of spoken language, otherwise known as body language. Mime is the art form that does not precisely imitate real life, physical action, but gives an illusion of that action. A tableau is a living picture posed by players. Inconsistency. Objects that are mimed must remain the same size. Here we have the origins and the evolution of pantomime. First, we begin with the cavemen who used nonverbal communication to tell the story of their hunts and any other encounters they had during their lifetime. Then we evolved into the European operas and ballets. Some ballets you might be familiar with would be The Nutcracker, Swan Lake, Cinderella. All of these stories rely on the mediums of dance and music to tell their story rather than verbal communication. Silent films are ones that exactly how you think of, where no talking is involved whatsoever. Everything has a nice music underscore, and the film is relied on the actor's facial expressions as well as physical movements to move the story forward. And then last, it has evolved into what we see in performing arts today. Pantomime and the use of pantomime in nonverbal communication is something that is evident in any sort of performing arts medium, whether it is music, whether it's dance, whether it's theater. And it continues to be, just as it was with its origins, a captivating form of engaging the audience. Some famous pantomime artists that you have probably heard of, the first being Charlie Chaplin. He was a silent movie star known as the Tramp. With his iconic mustache and bowler hat, you can instantly see his movies and know the physical as well as facial expressions that he continuously created. Marceau is a French icon of mime. He could take sold-out venues where acts such as like Simon and Garfunkel, who needed, full band setups. He could literally, all he needed was a stage and a spotlight, and he could engage every single person in the room without even saying a word. It was quite impressive and something that we as actors hope to attribute to. Here you see Marceau is a traditional mime, pantomime makeup setting. He could do so much more with less, and like I said, captivate an entire audience with just the use of a spotlight and the small box that you see in the second picture. Notice that when it comes to his makeup, he had a white painted face with exaggerated features to enhance the expressions he was trying to emote on stage, as well as using a full use of his body to show physicality. Charlie Chaplin was considered the original pantomime artist of our time as well as for film. If you notice, his makeup in comparison to Marceau's is a little bit more muted, but it still does have distinct black and white characteristics to really enhance facial expressions, especially around the eyes and the eyebrows. His signature mustache and bowler hat are what set him apart from other actors of the time, as well as the oversized clown shoes, the small 3 times too small jacket, and his strong use of physical activity and physical action in the films. So when we think about famous pantomime artists today, these are the groups that come to mind. Dance groups is one that we see all the time through social media. Jabberwockies from America's Best Dance Crew was one of the first dance crews to really showcase and really bring to life the popularity of modern day dance crews. The next group would be the Blue Man Group, followed by Cirque Du Soleil, who relies on their physical attributes, their acrobatic-like talents, and circus-like activities to tell a story through nonverbal communication. And then lastly, the guy that most people are familiar with is Tape Face. He was a contestant on America's Got Talent a few years ago, and he had a wide piece of duct tape on his face and only used his eyes and his eyebrows as well as his hands to really portray a scene and tell quite a funny story. As you can see down here in the bottom left, you would have the Jabberwockies in their Kangol hats. This is our version of a modern day dance group that uses mime to express their stories. In the middle here on this informational poster, you see the different hand movements associated with ballerinas to tell their story. And then of course on the bottom right, you see a ballerina who is using her body to properly communicate what her character is currently feeling. This was the Blue Man Group. This was the group that they put on this blue latex paint to give themselves a sense of unity, and they rely on percussive instruments to tell their story to the audience. Cirque du Soleil, as you can see, has lots of different attributes, whether it's the costumes to give away the theme or the music associated with the theme. But the one thing that always stands out with the Cirque du Soleil performance is the physicality behind each of the performances. Notice the amount of physicality associated in both pictures. Both are strongly physical, but definitely show different themes and different storylines. And then of course here's a picture of Tape Face working with his two puppets. They typically like to perform a popular song or love song, thus making his character Tape Face an uncomfortable middleman in their love triangle. So what is pantomime? If we break down the word, we know that panto means acting without props and mime means acting without words. Putting them together, it's acting without props and words. It's movement that can be expressive, facial expressions, or gestures. These movements tend to either A, tell something significant about a character, B, tell a story, or C, portray an activity without using any real objects. Common reasons why it's used in the theater, first and foremost, would be tableaus. These are living pictures posed by actors. Typically, you see these pictures often at the beginning of an act, or you see them as a scene progresses. And these are movements that inaudibly tell part of the story. Some companies and or movements that most people use in the theater. Frantic Assembly is a movement organization created from Scotland, and they focus on the importance of physicality in the theater. Some movement techniques would be the Laban efforts and the viewpoints. There are 6 skills associated with pantomime that should be included in a story that is solely pantomime. These skills include shape, weight, texture, resistance, expression, and temperature. And we're going to go over these and discuss how they have their merit. So now in your class notebook, you should have on the bottom the word resistance and then a blank, and then underneath it, it says write your own example here. As I give you each definition of the different pantomime skills, I want you to write the definition, and then I will go over the examples that I've come up with for each of these words, and I want you to create your own example based off the definitions given. So resistance is the act or power of resisting, opposing, or withstanding. Think of it like this. Say you have to push a large rock up a hill. The resistance of the rock going up the hill is something that you have to be able to show, especially since you don't have the rock and no words to communicate. Another example would be if there's a locked door on stage. Now, obviously, the door is not actually locked, but if the scene calls for a locked door, it is in the interest of the actor to use their pantomime skills of resistance to show the audience that that door is indeed locked. The stronger this resistance pantomime skill is, the stronger the audience is going to believe what you have to say. The next word is texture, which is a tactile quality of the surface. If you notice in the picture you've seen here shows different textures of yarn. Notice how it all interacts with each other. You know, the way that we interact with things has a specific texture. I talk to my mother very differently than how I talk to my husband. And so the texture that I have with them, how I go about approaching them, is very specific. When we're thinking about objects and how we would pantomime objects, some examples that come to mind are picking up something made out of glass versus picking up something made out of plastic or rubber. Chances are, if you're picking up something made out of glass, you treat it with more delicacy. You make sure to use two hands. You try not to bump into anything because you don't want it to smash into a million pieces. Versus if something is made out of plastic and rubber, you tend to be a little more lax with how you hold it. You tend to only hold it with one hand, and you don't mind if you accidentally bump into someone. You might spill something out of your cup, but chances are, you know, the piece that you're holding is going to totally be fine. Another example would be touching fur versus touching a cactus. You know, we react to those two textiles in different ways. So your reaction to the object is a pantomime skill that determines the textile for that scene. The next word is weight, which is heaviness or mass of an object. Things that look heavy and may not be heavy, or look light and may not be light, are common on the stage. If we show how heavy something is, it sells better to the audience. So even if that weight is made of foam, it is our job to act like it is the weight of whatever it says on the prop, so that the audience believes that we really are trying to lift said item. Temperature is the degree or intensity of heat present in a substance or object. So, for example, you would treat a hot cup of coffee completely different from a glass of iced tea. Temperature obviously also applies to showing the weather. If it was incredibly hot in the scene, your pantomime skills would showcase the heat by fanning yourself or using your clothes to fan yourself with long facial expressions. Speaking of expressions, expressions are the most important pantomime skill. It is the indication of feeling, spirit, character, etc., as on the face. Determining a character's mood is done through facial expressions. Down here we have Jim Varney, who is best known for his Ernest Goes To movies back from the late 80s, early 90s. Notice how his clear representation of these different feelings and how dramatic they are. The best way to show emotion is through the expression of your face. And lastly, you have the shape, which is the silhouette of an object. It's important to show the shape of an object, especially if you don't physically have said object. Once you've presented the shape, keep in mind that it should remain consistent and not change in forms of size. So this concludes our presentation of pantomime. Next class, we will be observing some videos and different examples of pantomime and writing discussions on how these videos may make us feel, as well as what type of pantomime skills are the actors presently using. If you'd like to check out some videos before next class period's assignment, I highly recommend you check out our YouTube playlist for Theater 1 for the second 6 weeks. If you need to go back and fill in the blanks for any of our notes today, please go ahead and do so now. But thank you so much for watching, and tune in next time. Bye!